Thank you all for joining us today. As we get started here, understand that this is a recorded session, but I will be watching the chat area live to answer questions and engage in conversation. If there are any answers we cannot provide today, or you think of something afterward, you can contact me at russ.nicloy@macertechnologies.com. This session is on plan production sheet creation and how to set up for WIS.dot projects. Now, most of the WIS.dot plan production sheets have common aspects that can be set up early in the workflow. With planning, this can make the project-specific work easier to get to and complete. In this session, we will look at starting the sheets, what should be referenced and how, adding sheets to the project sheet set, and a look at special sheets that don't really follow the normal workflow. Just a little bit about me. My name is Russ Nicloy. I'm a civil drafting and solutions specialist at Macer Technologies. I have 10 years of production experience, and then also I was at a reseller for 13 years. So I got to see and be involved with a lot of different types of projects across the civil spectrum. I also have worked closely with WIS.dot during the implementation and evolution of Civil 3D standards, and I'm currently a consultant member of the Methods Development Unit focusing on training. So let's take a look first at how to create the sheet file. Generally, a sheet file is going to be started with a basic template. It's the template that is the default for design. In 2020, it's called the basic design.dwt. You could also use the QNew tool or the plus tool to start a file because those are the default starts. They pull that basic design template for you. There are also tool palettes that have access to the template start. You'll see that here in the screenshot that I provide right here. This is just one example of this. It shows up on several different palettes and looks like that. That is the basic design DWT. After you've started the file, one of the things that you're going to want to do is go in and set the scale of the drafting area to what the template is going to be and what the sheet is going to have. So if you're planning on doing a 40 scale sheet, go into the model space area, the drafting area, and set that to 40 as well. That way it kind of lines, what you're going to see in model space with what you're going to see in the sheet, and helps out as you progress. You can change this. They don't have to be the same, but it's a good idea to set that at the beginning as kind of your starting point. Also, one of the other tools that's been added here in the WIS.dot Sheets tab is an Add All Components. What happened here is instead of putting every multi-liter text and dimension and text style and everything into every file, they stripped down, WIS.dot has stripped down the basic design template to just what's needed, and then Add All Components adds those other things to it if you deem it necessary. This is such an important part of the sheets that we just recommend you do it right away. At the end of the file, at the end of the sheet process, just before you're done with the project, you can purge this file out of any components that aren't used. That way it kind of trims that file back down to just what's needed. And of course, at the end of all this, as you're setting this up, you are going to want to save the file as the proper name in the proper folder. So make sure that that is a step that you follow. Now, that's if you're creating a sheet file manually. If you are using the view frames to define views on sheets, like a plan and profile sheet or a traffic control sheet, things that you are creating sheets all along the project, the view frames really do a good job of that. For that, you're going to want to either create the view frames in its own file so you can data reference them into other files. If you're planning on doing that, it's in the design folder, view frame groups folder, and then name it as VFG for view frame groups with the alignment name and the scale. That way people will know, okay, that file has this view frame group in it, and they'll be able to access it quickly if, without asking you about it. They'll know what's in each file. Or you could put the view frames in the sheet that you're building itself. That way it's just natively there. You don't have to data reference that in. Now, the decision on the view frames is, do you want a data reference view frame group into different files or just create it there natively? If you have to use the 40 scale view frames in several different files, doing it as a data shortcut or a data reference will allow you to have one set of frames used over and over. That way they always line up with each other, and it makes a consistent look to the sheets as you're building them. Doing the inside the sheet itself is a little bit smoother just because it's more localized and you don't have to do one whole step on the data reference. Now, for the sheet itself, you start that normally using the template or the tool palette, as I've already discussed, and then you data reference in the view frame group just like you would surfaces, alignments, profiles, or whatever else you might need to data shortcut into that file. So let's go in and create some sheets here. As I said, really basically what you're doing is just starting a design file. The file that opens when you open Civil 3D is actually pulling from the Wis.template file, or you could use the Q New button in the quick access toolbar, or the plus sign here. All three of those will create the correct file. Fourth way is to go to the menu browser and click New. I'm doing this just to show you where it is. That tool will take you right to where the templates are, and this Design Start DWT is the correct one there. I'm going to click Open. Now I am also going to show you the tool palette. So I'll go to the Wis.Sheets tab of the ribbon. I'm going to click on Palettes On Off. And then in the sheet creation area, the sheet layouts is in the second button here. I'll click on that and that will populate this with the correct information. The first one here is the startup template. That is the same file that I just started. So I could click it here and start the same process. So basically a fifth way to do this. Down below that are layout tabs. We have plan detail layout tabs. And if I scroll down a little further, there's some dual plan. So if you have a dual plan need, you've got those here. I'm going to do a 1 to 50 scale here. I'll left click on that. It's asking at the command line to name it. I'm going to name it 01 and enter. And then it throws that in, puts the tab down here. I'm going to right click on layout 1 and delete that one just to get rid of that, kind of clean this up. And then I'm going to go over to the model tab again, even though I've got the sheet where I want it. There's a couple other things that we need to add here. First of all, the add all components. This is in the Wis.Sheets Standard Components panel, add all components. Let me show you what it looks like without it. I'm going to go over here to the multi-line, multi-leader text, and notice there's only one style there, the standard style. For dimensions, there are a couple but there aren't very many. This also applies to line types and maybe a couple layers here or there. There's quite a bit of components that come in with this add all components. I'm going to left click on that and bring those in. It takes a second to load them up. But now if I go over to multi-leader, notice all the styles. It does take a second to load. Notice all the styles that are available to us. Also the dimensions. A ton more options there that we didn't have before. The idea is that you can use the ones that are there now and then afterwards purge out the ones that you didn't use. So whatever's not used, purge is going to clean that out for you and keep this streamlined. The other thing that we should do is make sure that the drawing scale is set to the same scale as our file. I'm going to come down here to the scale and set this to 1 to 50. That way anything that we do while we're in the model space here, we will see it in context of what the sheet will be. You can change that at any time, but it's best to have that set like that. Now the other thing is I'm going to go over here and get ready to work in here, but I want to save this file off. I'm going to click the save command, browse over to our project, and this sheet is going to be our 023201-PS, so our permanent signing sheet. I'll say save, so it's in the right folder with the correct naming. That's all held in the FDM, and you can look that information up there. I'm going to close out this tool palette because we don't need that right now. I am going to open up another file here because I do want to show something a little bit further down the road. I'm going to go into our TC, our traffic control file or traffic control sheet. And in this file you can see that we have view frames already in here. We haven't had the sheets created. I'm going to show you that process so you can see where this is. I'm going to go to the Output tab of the ribbon, plan production, create sheets. Now, these frames have been XREF'd in, so when I use this, it's going to create sheets from that. I'm going to skip over some of these steps and go to the sheet set tab, add to existing sheet set. Notice not the new sheet set. I'll come over here to the ellipsis button and then browse over to our project. Happen to be there already. There's our project number with the DST. Now, if this is not here, stop, cancel out of what you're doing and create that DST. It needs to be created the WIS.dot method, not using the new process, because this links all the information from the sheet to the title block and so forth. So I'm going to select on that, click open, and now that's set. Now we will come back and look at this process a little bit more in depth here, so I am going to cancel out of that, but I wanted to show where that was in the file. So let's take a look at the next step, which is referencing the data. There are two things that we need to cover here, both the external reference, or XREF, and data reference, or data ref, or DREF. I'm going to start with XREF, even though I kind of get a feeling that data ref is more important. They're actually both very important to this process, and doing the XREF first will allow the data to come in behind other things so that it won't be on top and won't obscure things that may be more important. So for the XREF, you'll want to use the WIS.dot tool load XREF on layer tool, and you can see here this tool is in the manage panel in both the WIS.dot sheets and the WIS.dot design ribbons. This tool sets the relative path, overlay attachment, the location, as well as the layer automatically. These are all things that users usually miss in one way or another. Now, if you get 3 of these right, but you get a 4th one wrong, this one gets all 4 of the things that you need correct. I'll admit mine is the layer setting. I always forget that part. The other ones I'm pretty good at, but this tool streamlines it. It also does it all at once under the hood. So once you use the tool, you don't have to chase these down and make sure that they're correct. Now, there is one downside to this, and that it is a one XREF at a time, but I think that's mitigated in the fact that everything is correct and it's very streamlined for what it does. So I think there's a real benefit to using this tool for connecting XREFs. The other tool that we need to look at is the data reference. These are the data shortcuts that you're going to use and bring into your sheet file for various reasons, various displays or data that it needs. Things like surfaces, either existing or refinement surfaces. Both of those are critical to this. Most times you won't do something other than a refinement surface for the proposed surface, because that is the final proposed all pasted together, and it's really an important structure of the surfaces that are available here. You'll also data reference in alignments and profiles. You may or may not need them in some cases, but if you ever need alignment labels, then just bring in the alignments. If you were to bring in profiles and didn't need them, that wouldn't hurt anything, but it does make the profiles available if you're doing plan and profile sheets, that type of thing. Also, the view frames, as we've discussed, you could, unless you've built them in the file that you're using directly, you will want to data reference in the appropriate view frames. You may have several different versions. You need to bring in the right scale and so forth. Also, you might be bringing in the corridor. Now, this is something that some of you may not be aware of that you can do. A couple of years ago, Autodesk made this available that you could data shortcut in a corridor. We've done some testing and it looks really good, especially for cross-section sheets. The old workflow for cross-sections was to XREF in the corridor file, but that brought a lot of other, I don't want to say junk, but a lot of other stuff, a lot of other baggage. Whereas the XREF, or the data reference of the corridor brings just the corridor itself, which, especially in cross-section sheets, allows you to label and visualize things appropriately in the file. So that's something important. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to XREF first and then data reference after that. So to do this, I'm going to go to the WIS.sheets or the WIS.design tab. Actually, I'll go to the WIS.design tab this time and show you the manage panel and load XREF on layer. I'm going to click that button. That brings us to the layout, the XREF tool for this project. So it's right where we need to be for this project. I'm going to go up one level to our base data folder, And I'm going to grab the Topo EX and open. And as I mentioned, this is going to put it in on the correct layer at the correct location. I'm going to have to zoom extents because it didn't take me over to it. But it's also overlaying it instead of attaching it and making sure it's a relative path XREF. So all of that is set. This is now available. We can start working on this file. If there are more XREFs that you need here, you will have to go up and start that file over. Let me go over to the wis.sheets and show that that same managed panel and load XREF on layer is there as well. So that being said, let's go in and do some data referencing then. I'm going to come into the prospector, scroll down to our data shortcuts area, and I'm going to expand open surfaces. I've got quite a few surfaces here, but really I want the existing surface. So I'm going to right click and create reference. And in here, I'm going to make this the existing border just so we can see it. And I'll scroll down a little bit further into the refinement surfaces. I'm going to bring in this case, the top. So refinement 51 top. And set that to a proposed border. Again, just so we can see where it is in the file. If I scroll down a little further, here are alignments under center line. We have our 51. There's also 47, which is you may need. So I'm just going to bring in the 51 here. I'll create reference. And again, making sure the style and the label set for whatever you're doing here is set correctly. I'll say OK, and that throws that in. As I said, I did the XREF first so that the alignment now is on top of the XREF and it's not obscured. Probably not a problem in most cases, but it might be a good habit to get into just to make sure that things look correct. So a lot more XREFs that could be done. That's as far as I'm going to take that one, though. I do want to show that if the corridors are available, in this point, we're not at this point in our file, but you can XREF in the corridors to the project here. So now let's look at the special sheet cases. These are things that don't follow the normal rules, and really it's a short list, but they're important. Title sheets in particular, as well as the miscellaneous quantities and the earthwork speed sheets. And if you haven't seen a speed sheet before, we'll show you what that looks like. Let's look at title sheets first. Really one of the major points to the title sheets is that you are going to be adding county maps to this. The county maps used to be part of the standards download, but now they are on the website. In fact, notice that that text there is green hypertext. If you download the slide deck that I'm showing here, in this tab, in the 13th page, this is actually a live link. You can control select it and it will take you over to the page that has the data that you need to download here. Or you could just enter that data or search it down wherever you need to find it there. This is on the doing business page. I'm going to recommend that you look at the 2018 county maps. I don't think anyone's starting a project in 2016 anymore. Notice that that's an STB, which is a different type of file than the now 2018-2020 CTB file. So use the 2018 county maps CTB file. You will XREF that into the file, turn a whole bunch of things off that aren't needed, but it's a great way to place in county maps in the title sheets. Also, besides the county maps, the other different thing about the title sheets is that you can edit the attributes in the title block directly. You double click on the title block, any part of it, and you'll see a lot of information is available in the Edit Attributes tool. You can also create title sheet blocks from the tool palette. These are things, you could add just blank text or regular multi-line text, but notice that the screenshot of the palette there, the title palette, has a bunch of information for if you need to add a signature block or if you need to add additional project information or township arrow markers, that kind of thing. Those blocks are all made and streamlined for this, so you can drop them in on the file. The other special sheet case was the miscellaneous quantities or earthwork speed sheets. Now, speed sheets are basically sheets that have frames that indicate where the layout tabs are focused so that you can do drafting inside of those areas and they end up nicely in the sheet layout. The miscellaneous quantities and the earthwork speed sheets will be available through the wis.sheets tab of the ribbon On the sheet creation panel, you see that there the quantity and the earthwork tool palettes. And then down below are the actual tool palettes themselves. So on the startup main tab, you get, for quantities, you get the miscellaneous quantities speed sheet, and the earthwork has the earthwork data speed sheet. Both of those have the frames there. I do want to call out that up here is information for both of them. They both will have this on how to interact with this area here. It's basically you are going to be pasting in a link to Excel file data into these areas, and that kind of spells it out on each time you use this speed sheet. So let's create a title sheet here. I've opened up a file already. I'm just going to hit Save As and save that file here. It's 010101-TI. And then in here, I'm going to go to the Wis.Sheets tab of the ribbon, Sheet Creation, the title palette here. I'm going to click on that and go to Palettes On Off to make sure it shows up there. In here again, we could start the file from here, but I'm going to pick which layout based on the size. So right now 1 inch equals half a mile, 1 inch equals a mile, or 1 inch equals 2 miles. I'm going to pick the 1 mile option there. And again, rename this 01. Then I'm going to go over to the Model tab here and add in our county maps. I did just want to show this is the web page here. It's under the Doing Business Engineering Consultants, Consultant Resources page. If I scroll down, here is that option, the 2018 county maps. Now what I've done personally is I downloaded them once and put them on a file, a location on my C drive so I can get to them anytime here, and then place them. I copied over the 2 counties that my project is in into my project folder so that the originals in that C drive location are not touched. And you can use them for anything here. So I'm going to go up and use the Load XREF on Layer. I will go up 1 layer here to my base data. I brought them into my other folder. I'm going to bring in Vilas County. I'll click on Open. And then Zoom Extents. And this is what you should see. There's a lot of stuff in here, a lot of things you can turn off. In fact, I'll go to the Home tab, use the Off tool, and just turn off the frame and turn off the text and the mapping and all of these things that aren't needed. There's some hatching here that we won't need, and actually we won't need the hatching on the lakes and that type of thing. So basically trim down the file until it looks the way that you need it to look. I'm going to go over to my 01 tab here. I'll double click in the viewport. Now this is set to 1 inch equals 1 mile. I'm going to double click in it, unlock the viewport so I can zoom over to the file. I'm going to zoom into where my project is located or close to it. Usually I zoom in a little bit too close and then come back down here and change the scale of that to the 1 inch equals 1 mile. And now I can browse around at that scale and lock that in. I do need to bring Oneida in later, but that's a step I'll take later. I'm going to double click and leave that alone. I'm going to double click on the title block here. As I said, there's a lot of information here, project numbers and titles and so forth that are in the Enhanced Attribute Editor. All you have to do is come down here. Well, the project ID, I could type that number in here. 107-1970. I'll click Apply. Now there's also a second one here. You may not see where each one does. One is here, one's down here somewhere. So each of these, what you do is you go in and you click in the value. So if I highlight limits, I can highlight that and type in something new, or project ID for project ID number 3. Like I said, there's a lot of fields in here that you're going to want to be concerned with and get that correct. Another thing you can do in here is select on the state icon here and click the down arrow and highlight the county that you're working in. I click on Vilas and that highlights there. Since this is 2, I might need to hatch the second one, but it's a quick hatching way that you can do that. Another thing that you would need to do is go in to, on the title tool palette here, if you scroll down, there's multi-leader text here, a begin project. We're going to begin the project here. put that in. Now it's asking, do I want to overwrite the default text? I'll say no, because I like most of that text, but I do need to set the station. I just double click on that, and then highlight this and type in 520 plus 00, and that's the beginning of our project. You can add in end of project and several other typical text. You could also bring in the town and range. Let me do a range number here and say that, we know that the range is going to start here. I'll double click and say, well, this is range 6. And then put in a little dash there to indicate where that is actually going through in this area in your title block. Another typical sheet, or non-typical sheet, I should say, is the miscellaneous quantities or the earthwork quantities sheet. For this, I'm going to go to the Wis.Sheets tab again. I'll go down and let's do quantity first. I'll click on the quantity tool palette. Actually, I have to turn my palettes back on. In here, under startup, notice that there's only one option here. It's a speed sheet. I'll left click on that. And there it throws those frames out. Now, each of these frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so forth, is related to the tabs down here. So if I were to draw a line in here, I can go to 1 and you would see that line there. I mentioned this earlier that the special instructions are up here. It indicates how you're going to use this sheet. Basically, we're just pasting links, not just pasting Excel spreadsheets in these areas here. And then let me bring in the Excel spreadsheet here so you can see there's some things that we need to do to the Excel spreadsheet that we're going to paste in. I'm going to highlight the area that I'm working with here and make sure that it's Calibri Light 8. That way it is a standard size for the area. If the table ends up too big, you will need to split this up. You don't want to resize it in Civil 3D. You need it to be the correct size in here. Notice I've got several different tabs here that I would need to check and click on. The other thing we need to do is go to the View tab and turn off the grid lines. Those grid lines in the background will show up, and we don't want those to show up in Civil 3D. So I am going to highlight the part that I want to take here. I'll right click and copy. Now I'm going to minimize this, and in Civil 3D I'm going to go to the Home tab of the ribbon, the clipboard panel, the paste drop down. I want to paste special, and in here it's going to ask me what I want to paste. I need to click on paste link and then make sure it's set to Microsoft Excel worksheet, which should be the first one. That it should be there already. I'll click OK and then paste that into the file. As I said, if that's too big, don't split it here. You need to go back to the Excel file and fix that there. So I would repeat that for each of the tables that I'm adding in here. Don't worry about the frame. That does not print. It goes away when you print out this sheet. So the same thing is true. All of this is true for the earthwork tab. So again, Wis.Sheets, sheet creation, earthwork. Here there is a design production, so we can create a sheet, but this will create the earthwork data spreadsheet, and again we get the instructions and the frames, except for the names and the wording here. It's almost difficult to tell you which one you're looking at, but really the same function is there. So now let's look at the adding layout tabs to the sheet set manager. It's an important part of the sheet process here. If you use the Create Sheets from View Frames tool, so you've data referenced in View Frames and create sheets from those View Frames, that process automatically adds to the sheet set for you. If you don't use that process and you need to manually add sheets, and that happens quite often, there is a way to do that as well. So either way, you're covered. For the Create Sheets from View Frames process, the most important step of this is on the Sheet Set tab of the wizard. It'll walk you through the things it needs, but you'll come to this page. You want to always choose Add to Existing Sheet Set. Now, some rules have, well, not in this case, and that type of thing, but here this is really absolute, because the new sheet set will not be tied properly to the Wis.title blocks. The Add to Existing Sheet Set has to be used. You click the ellipsis button, which again, I've got it marked there in the screenshot. That takes you over to the second screenshot where you should have the DST file for the project already built. If you don't, you have to pause yourself right there, build that DST file, and look that up online, on the Civil 3D KB to make sure that you build that correctly. But that should be part of your project already. Make sure you pick the project DST, not one of the other ones that's available there. And that will get you lined up for the sheets being automatically added to the sheet set. Now, if you're not using that method, if you're manually adding them, what you want to do is right-click in the Sheet Set Manager or the Layout tab. Now, either the Layout tab or any part of the Sheet Set Manager will allow you to choose an option, Import Layout as Sheet. If you right-click on the subset where it needs to go, notice like all the O2 drawings have an area in the sheet set there. You just right-click on the subset, tell it to layout as sheet, and it will drop in. You can import multiple drawing files at the same time. So many times you won't have multiples, but you can. You can kind of browse around and pick the ones that you need to import at any given time. You will probably need to rename to remove the prefix number. Notice in my screenshot there under typical sections, I have an 01 and 02. A lot of times it'll come in with a 1-01 and a 1-02 or some kind of prefix there. The rename tool is very easy to use, and you can wipe out that prefix as you add that information in. The other thing that's pretty likely is that the sheet set will have these in the wrong area, especially if it's automatically added. It'll add it down below the 09 sheet, and you'll need to move them up into the correct subset. You want the subset name in there. Notice I've got a general notes, project overview, typical sections, and then I've moved the sheets up under typical sections. That's important for the title block area there, that you have them under the properly named subset and their location there. So two things that you need to be aware of. So let's take a look at adding these sheets to the sheet set. I'm in that permanent signing file. I've added in the view frames here to add individual or manual groups or views or sheets to the sheet set. In fact, let me go over to 01 here so you can see I've got a sheet that I have all set up, and I would have annotated this and so forth. I'm going to type SSM at the command line. There are other ways to open it. There's icons and so forth, but SSM is pretty straightforward. I'm going to come in here and go to the open command at the very top there. Browse over to our project and find that DST file for our project. I'll click open, and there you can see that project is already started here. Now to bring in this individual file, I'm going to right click on the area that needs it. I'm going to go into 09, right click and create a new subset. I'm going to call this example just so that you'll see where that name pops up, that it's not a standard one. I'm going to right click on example and say import layout as sheet. You could right click on any of these subsets or the name of the project as well. I'm going to import layout as subset as sheet. I'll go to browse to drawings. I'll browse over to our project here. And then here's our PS file that I'm working in. It does not have to be open. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. In this case, it is. And we only have the one layout tab, so I only have one to check mark. Available for import. Sheets can only be part of one sheet set at a time, so it will warn you if it sees that it's already part of another sheet set. I am going to turn off the prefix sheet titles with the file name, or you should. I'm actually going to make a mistake here and leave that on. I'll click import checked, and then come in here and notice that it prefaces it with the name of the file. I'm going to right click, rename, renumber, and come in here and just take that out so I can fix that error that I made. I'll click OK, and there that is. Now I'm going to go over and open up our traffic control file. And then I'm going to bring these in, but I'm going to do it the automated way. I'll go out to the output tab of the ribbon, plan production, create sheets. You saw me do this part earlier. Make sure that I've got the correct view frame group here for the project. I'm going to bring in all. You can bring in a subset by clicking selection. Make sure that all layouts are in the current drawing, and the layout name, I'm going to click on the template editor. And basically I'm just checking to make sure that this start number is correct. I'll say okay to that. Down here, the north arrow is correct. I'll click next. As I mentioned before, I'm using added to existing sheet set. I will browse over and put it into our project DST, making sure I'm in the right project there. Make sure that the locations are right, and this is all looking okay. I'll click create, making sure the starting number is good there. I'll click create sheets. It's going to save the file as it does this, and then it's going to run for a second. It's created those layout tabs down below. And there it adds it at the bottom of the project. Well, this isn't correct. This is not where we want it. So I'm going to grab all 18 of those sheets. And I'm going to move that up under the I'm going to right click on O2, create a new subset. This is perm signing. Obviously I'm doing a little shortcut on the name there. And then I'm going to grab all 18 of these, just shift select them, and then drag them up until permanent siding highlights in blue. That means that I'm putting it underneath that. Otherwise, it'll put it on the same level as perm siding, and it won't actually put that text in there. This is also another place where we have the one prefix that we don't want. I'll right click on the first one, click rename, renumber, and then delete the number out of each of these fields. I just hit delete, next, delete, next, delete, next, and so forth. I'm not going to do all of them, but that's the process. It goes very, very quickly to clean that up. Now I'm going to head over to the O1 sheet and show you that the perm signing, the way that I spelled it and everything, is showing up in the title block, as well as other information from the project itself. This is why you use the already existing project sheet set manager DST file, because all of that is linked up. The new one will not do that for you. So in conclusion, just want to state out the things that I want you to take away from this, the kind of the high points here. Starting files and adding layout tabs can be expedited through the tool palettes. Honestly, I think it's a great expedition of how to start a file and making sure the layout tabs in particular are correct. Also, all sheets need the add all components as you're starting off, and you should set the drafting scale as you're getting started with a new sheet. If you're XREFing information in, which is very likely, you should use the wis.xref tool. It's going to give you the correct information more quickly than if you had to hunt it down yourself. Also, the view frame groups, do you want to data reference them in or not data reference them in? That's the question for you for each project and each situation that you find yourself in. And finally, the sheet set manager, never use the new one. Always set it to the project DST that should already be in your project file. So I do want to thank you. Hopefully we've been able to answer some questions as the presentation has gone on here. If you have other questions, my email address is down below. I do have the QR code which will add me to your address book immediately. If you've got a phone, you can screenshot that. But thank you very much for joining us, and please enjoy the rest of the workshop.